Hey everyone, it's Horror Free For All, and I hope you're doing well today. I have here a film review of a movie that came out in 2015. It was created by M. Night Shyamalan, who is a very divisive creator, especially nowadays compared to his heyday stuff like Invincible or maybe as recent as Split and Glass. Those movies kind of made a comeback for him, but then again, he's the same guy who made the Avatar: The Last Airbender live action movie that really bombed and pissed off a whole entire fan base. This is the same guy who made Old, one of the most divisive recent horror films of late. But he's also responsible for creating classics like The Sixth Sense or The Village or Signs. So coming to this movie, I remembered it coming out in 2015. I never saw it. And I picked it up because I was curious. And it's called The Visit. Now, The Visit is one of those kid protagonist horror films that sometimes are rated PG-13, sometimes rated R. I don't know if this film is PG-13. I think it is. It could be rated R, but I do remember people talking about this being like M. Night Shyamalan's found footage, jump scare popcorn flick movie. And I was like, I'm going to give this a shot because I saw the cast ensemble and I saw that Catherine Hahn was in it. And I usually like anything else that she's in, but I didn't recognize anybody else in the starring role. So I was like, you know what, I'll try this out. And after watching this, I have to say this is one of the weirdest horror films I've ever seen. But I mean that in like a good way. You know what I mean? For an hour and 30-minute film in that found footage style and this horror comedy tone with those typical, this is still a thing going on, but the typical 2000s, 2010s jump scare popcorn flick nature thrown in there. I had fun with this movie. And I know after watching this, I saw some opinions online about it. People are very mixed on it, it seems. Nobody seems to outright hate it, but nobody seems to full on think this is the best thing ever. I'm kind of in the middle with everybody on it. I think it's mildly a mixed bag, but I think it's mostly positives here. And that goes without saying that this movie does have some flaws, but I came out enjoying it. So I would give a recommend. If you have not seen M. Night Shyamalan's The Visit, go check this out. This might surprise you. It's a very weird movie. So let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So The Visit is a movie about these two kids named Becca and Tyler. They are siblings, separated by a few years. They are from a divorced family. Their father has divorced their mom and has essentially left them to be raised by a single mom. And recently, in the beginning of the movie, you learn that the daughter, the main character Becca, is wanting to make a documentary about these kids going to visit their grandparents for the first time ever because Catherine Hahn's character, who plays the mom, is reached out to by the grandparents who they haven't, conversed in a long time, as we learn through the beginning of the film, because when she was younger, she had a spat with her parents, kind of left home, hasn't spoke in them in almost over a decade, and got married, had kids, and the grandparents finally got through, said, hey, look, we're counselors now, everything's different, we would like to see our grandkids. So she asked the kids if they want to go visit, and they say, of course. And I think the kids are more incentivized to go see the grandparents because of all the recent things going on with their parents' drama, essentially. So the daughter has taken upon herself to take a couple cameras along with her brother to go visit the grandparents. And the movie starts out with them essentially going on a train. I think it's a train or maybe a bus. And on the ride over to the grandparents' house, who live out in this farmland a couple hours away, you get to see their personalities unfold. Becca is like a typical teenage girl that's 15. She's kind of quirky, into, filmography and stuff like that. But she has this thing where she doesn't like to look in the mirror anymore. She doesn't, she's not really all that incentivized to keep up with thinking about herself and self-care. She's always trying to look for things on the outside to distract her. And the younger brother is more anal, especially about germs. He has this germophobia thing going on, but he's also kind of funny. And we get to see him kind of showcase that he can rap, and he raps with like a beatbox and train conductor guy, and kills some time in the documentary. And he's like, at the end, we need to show another freestyle for me when we come back from the grandparents, because everybody's going to want to see my rap skills. So there might be some payoff with that. But anyway, you get a sense that these are just like normal kids with some issues, but they're kind of understandable and they're empathizable, essentially. But they end up arriving with their grandparents, and they call their grandparents Pop, and Mama, I think, or Mama or something like that. And they seem like normal people at first. They're excited to see the grandkids. They take them to the farmhouse land, and they have dinner, and they think everything is normal. But when the kids are up in their bedroom the first night they're there, because they're only going to be there for a week, Pop tells them that lights out time is 9:30. It's time to go to bed around that point. And the kids are like, well, that's weird, but we can just hang out in the room and just do whatever. And Becca spends majority of this movie kind of working on uploading footage to her laptop and watching videos, while Tyler, he's more obsessed with cleaning up germs in the bathroom and all that. But the first night, they hear some weird ass noises, y'all. They're hearing some fucking cackling and some weird fucking shit going on, and they listen to it, and they peer downstairs, and they see their grandmother violently vomiting all over the floor, and they're like, what the fuck is going on? So they go back to bed, and the next morning they're talking with their grandparents about it, and they say, okay, well, your grandmother has this issue at night. She tends to throw up and get sick. It's just something that happens. It is what it is. And Pop spends majority of his time out in his barn area, and he's kind of secretive about it, and he seems like he doesn't want anybody to go there. And the kids one day are like, well, let's just go outside and film around and see what we can discover. And they end up finding this thing after they're looking for their Pop in this farm. They see this little passage under the porch of the house. So they decide to like crawl in it and see what's down in there. And let's just say the fucking grandma decides to follow him in there in this creepy ass way. And the kids are being chased, and Tyler has his own camera, and you see his point of view trying to escape. And then his sister escapes as well. And then the grandma comes out in a fucking freaky ass way. Her knees all muddied up. Her dress, which exposes her bare ass on the back end. Bizarre as hell. But she's like, oh, that was fun, whatever. And the kids start to realize that something might be wrong with their grandparents. So when they try to have a conversation with their mom, who happens to be on a cruise, like a Royal Caribbean cruise during this whole event, they try FaceTiming her, but the signal's all messed up and they can't really say everything they want to say. So they realize that they only have a couple more days left, and maybe they can just catch their mom up to speed once she gets back. Well, as the days go on, especially Tyler, I think, is the character that kind of discovers this. He wants to know what's going on in Pop's farmhouse, so he decides to go in there and peek around, and he smells something horrible, and he ventures inside, and he sees all these like adult diapers that are used, just chilled up and like stacked up in there, and it smells like absolute shit. And he's freaked out, and he tells a sister about it, and they confront the grandparents about it, and Mama tells him that he's embarrassed by this, but he has bladder control issues. And what he does is that he goes out to his farmhouse, he puts them out in there, and then he plans on burning them at a later point. So the kids are like, okay, if that's what it is, that's fine. But they still feel like something's wrong with Mama, because at certain points, right around nighttime, around 9:30, she starts to get like crazy and shit, like doing some maniacal shit. And one night, soon after they learn this, they hear some like weird ass noises out in the hallway, and they decide to go out in the hallway and investigate, and they turn on a light and they see their grandmother naked, clawing at the wall. So they're like, what the fuck is going on? And shit essentially starts to get wilder as the days go on. Near like day 5, 6, and 7, this is like the back half of the movie, the kids are like, they're pretty confident that there's something awry going on, especially after a point where the grandmother does something very nefarious, let's just say, and this builds up over the course of a couple days. And on the final day, they get through to their mom, who's gotten back from her cruise, and they happen to show their mom, what the grandparents are doing, and by showing them like via like the FaceTime, they put the camera onto them while they're outside, and the mom has this sickening realization about the grandparents, and I'm not going to spoil it, but she essentially tells the kids that something's not right. She's going to come immediately and try to rescue them. And let's just say the kids are freaked the fuck out, and they're like, okay, well, they don't suspect that we know something going on here. And this kind of plays into the rest of the movie here, where there's a conversation that happened a few days prior, and I kind of skimmed the surface on it because I don't want to spoil exactly what it is. But the grandmother says something completely wild as she's being interviewed by Becca, thinking that there's aliens in a pond that essentially take over people and stuff like that. And it sounds kind of conspiratory and all that. But in the final act, we get to see essentially the two siblings have to deal with these grandparents. And it may or may not involve them possibly being, something else, let's just say. I'm not going to spoil exactly what it is because I'll completely ruin the twist. But there's a lot of ambiguity of what that twist means anyway. And I'm sure there's fan speculations out there because M. Night Shyamalan movies are very vague for that reason. They're kind of like talking points and it's supposed to generate buzz and stuff. So take that for what you will. And we may or may not get to see a grisly discovery about events prior and how that ties into the remainder of the story. And that essentially is what you're going to expect out of The Visit. Now, if you want to know more of the mom's perspective, there is an alternate ending here that I think actually does work. And I don't know why they didn't just add this onto the actual film, because I think that sends it off in a very copacetic yet tragic way. But yeah, either way you go with either ending here, I think The Visit is a fun movie. For an hour and a half found footage movie, this has to be one of the more fun ones I've come across, especially like the faux documentary ones. And, while it's no troll hunter for me, I can see myself coming back to this and having fun with it again. I do really enjoy the characters in this film. I think Becca, while she's not as fun as Tyler, I definitely can see how Becca's parents' divorce has affected her, and her reason for wanting to document everything is because she feels like when it comes to family, these type of things matter. You want to document this stuff so you can keep the good memories intact. And I think that's the overall message of this movie, whether we're talking about the history of the mom, kind of abandoning her parents and leaving that life behind, getting married and avoiding her parents all these years. What's going on with Becca especially has a lot of correlation in like a contrastive way to what her mom did in the past about building a relationship with her grandparents and not wanting to burn a bridge, let's just say, like a divorce would. And I think she kind of feels that there's been a bridge burned with connecting herself with her father, and maybe she partially blames her mom for all this, and we do see this resentment towards her mother kind of vanish by the end of the movie. As for Tyler kind of feels like he had no control and no say in his parents' divorce. He's become a germaphobe, as the movie says, because he kind of develops some control, and he develops a complex where his motives for wanting to go visit the grandparents is so that he can have control and control again and be happy under a family roof that's not split up since his grandparents are still together. But we also see him kind of mature a little bit in the story as well, where he's forced into situations at a younger age of Becca. And the stuff he goes through in the story, you can definitely tell affect him by the end of the film, especially when we get to see the follow-up rap thing, yes, there is some payoff with that rap that he did early on when he tells his sister that he's going to rap for the end of the documentary. Yes, you do see a rap at the end, so that might imply that Tyler might be okay, but through the lyrics, you get to hear his journey and how he feels about it. And, he might sound like he can joke about it, but, you can definitely tell that he's learned to not take things so seriously and kind of see the humor in it all. And he's definitely the comedic relief of the movie overall. And I really enjoyed both of the characters. I don't know the exact names. I think it's Deanna Dunnigan and Peter McRobbie who play the grandparents. Peter McRobbie does a good job as Pop Pop, but Deanna Dunnigan, oh my God, she does a fantastic job playing Nana. And there's something about this woman that is absolutely like bone grating to me. When I see her in a scene, I just feel like something bad's going to happen. And it's because early on, M. Night Shyamalan's able to kind of show you a little glimpse of how unhinged this woman is. And even in scenes where she's not being unhinged, you're like, okay, when is this shit going to happen again? I think that's part of the genius behind this movie and how this movie kind of works the way it does, is that Shyamalan knows how to build suspense with a creepy character. And this character, by far, is the creepiest in the whole film. So my hat's off to the grandparents as well that did a good job. There are some weird unorthodox things in this film, and I don't know if it's trying to be a commentary on elder adult care or ageism. I know M. Night Shyamalan has been accused, especially with this movie and Old, for being ageist. But I feel like in this movie, at least, there's more commentary to be had. Despite, Old kind of having it too in almost similar ways. Except here, this is more kind of showing you what could happen, if there's your family not checking in on these people. The daughter, she's been disconnected for so many years. This stuff happening to her parents, she would have no knowledge of because she has no contact with. And I feel like what could have possibly made that a little better is if the mom was more involved in the story. But even despite that point, you do kind of feel like, hey, this is what happens when you age and all that. And there is some mild commentary. I'm not going to go into any specific things because I might give away parts of the movie that involve the twist, because M. Night Shyamalan is known for twists in his movies. But it is there, I feel. And you can definitely peel back the subtext with it. Whether you like it or not, whether you think it might be mildly offensive, I do think there is some shred of realism about it. So that's why I'm not going to say it's a negative. The setting of the movie, very creepy. The farmland aspect was great. There's some unique shots, like going under the porch in the film. That whole sequence was awesome, where you see both cameras of Tyler and Becca going through it. That was awesome. And how that was stitched together was really well done in that creepy way. The farmhouse reveal, as the story goes along, was done in a creepy way. Anytime there was a point where the characters were together, especially Tyler and Becca, and they hear some weird phenomenon going on, usually those scenes built up into a good jump scare moment. Yes, I already alluded that this film is a jump scare movie. It fits the bill and all of that. But I do think that the jump scares here legitimately got me, and they're not annoying. And you would be shocked that this movie doesn't overly rely on them, like something like a Sinister or a Sinister 2 would. Sinister 2 is probably the most jump scare ridden movie I've ever seen in my life. As in this, there's a couple ones here and there, but it's warranted. And I think they got to me. And I don't know if I brought this up, but this movie's humor, it's more of like a horror comedy. I do find myself kind of wanting to watch this again just because of the humor really landing. I don't know if it was the script. I don't know if it's because Jason Blum, who's the founder of Blumhouse, kind of helped out with this as well. But I don't know. There's something about it that, comes across humorous in the way that it depicts the story, at least in terms of production, comes off more of like a wholesome spoof. And I don't know how to explain that, but it registers well. It makes it more easier to watch, and it's more of an ingestible horror film in the process. There's something weird about it like that just really does work. So yeah, I have a lot of positives with this film, but I do have some pretty decent sized negatives with it. And I'm going to say this off the bat: for an hour and a half horror movie, it's very sparse with the horror. This is more of a mystery. And when the horror does happen, it is creepy, but it doesn't ever go too far with it all. In fact, I think there's enough weirdness, especially when you get to the revelations in the back half and some stuff that the grandparents say, especially involving the twist. There's a lot of ambiguity on top of it that could be played into for more horror, but they just don't do it here. And I don't know if M. Night Shyamalan was going for more, you have to think about it to make it scary. Maybe that's the genius behind it. I don't know. But the more I actually think about it, the less I find scary, because I would find a certain aspect scarier if this was done more overtly in the film, and I just don't feel like you get that in there. There's also some random stuff involving the grandfather near the end of the film, and Tyler, involving, let's just say, spells. What the fuck is going on? And it seems like it's actually played up to be a true thing. And here's the thing: I can easily go into the twist and spoil it, and I'm trying not to. But there's this whole angle about mental health that's throughout the whole movie, and you can't tell if this stuff is real or not real. This is kind of like how M. Night Shyamalan went into Split, I feel. And if you've seen that movie, you're going to get reminded of that movie when you watch this, especially if you've seen that and haven't watched this yet. It made me think about that and how I felt while watching that. But where I think that movie succeeded was the crescendo up to that reveal was the fact that there is something supernatural going on. There is something larger than humanity going on here. Here, you don't really feel that until way late into the film. So, okay. I mean, your mind can only go so many places with the concept of this early on until you're kind of steered in that direction. I feel like probably the biggest detriment to the script was this stuff should have been early on in the movie, and there should have been a little more supernatural stuff near the end of it. And that is something that I wish this movie had more of, sadly. And the last knock to this film, and this is just something more mild compared to the other ones. I do feel like, even for a found footage style movie, and this movie is supposed to be, Becca and Tyler cutting together footage at their grandparents' house, that's the style it's going for. I do feel like there are really sudden time lapses in the film that are kind of jarring sometimes. And it would be one thing if it happens once or twice, but there is some scenes that you'll be having a very tense-filled scene, and then all of a sudden the very next cut would be to something to kill the steam of it almost immediately. And you're like, well, that was a buzzkill. Why can't we build more onto what they just witnessed here? And it would happen multiple times in the movie where I kept feeling like I'm being tickled for 5 minutes, and then they stop, and then randomly 5 minutes later I'm getting tickle attacked again. I know that sounded kind of cringy, but that's literally how this movie feels sometimes. You just feel like you're going through all the motions, and then it just suddenly stops. And I don't like that. I don't like how jarring this movie can be at times in terms of its editing. I get it's a style thing, just not a fan of it. So, I don't know. From a 0 to 5 star basis, The Visit is a very quirky film. It has some problems. Some people might not find it scary whatsoever. Some people might think that it's annoying jump scare fodder. Some people can think it might be kind of disjointed comparative to the twist in the rest of the story. Maybe some people can even say, oh, this movie's predictable. I definitely think that one last positive I could say about this movie is that it's not predictable. But I find that in a good way, and I do think that the twist in this film recontextualizes some information you learn early on in the movie in a smart way. But I do feel like if it had more of an emphasis and a punch, this movie would be talked about more in the horror community. But I don't think this is a forgettable horror film. I think this movie is quite memorable, and I'm glad to have it in my collection. In terms of these kid protagonist movies where they have to fight monsters or encounter things from their perspective, this is one of the more entertaining ones. And time flies by. It's not generic like you would think it is. It's kind of different in an entertaining way. So I'm willing to give this movie a good, like a high good, maybe like a 3.75 out of 5 stars. Not quite a 4. I'm not quite pushing love with it. I do enjoy it. I would own this in my collection. I would rewatch it in the future. I would go out of my way to recommend it, but I just don't feel like it's something that I would revere as high as something like, I don't know, pick any of my favorite horror films or something like Cobweb, which I think is probably one of my favorite movies in this little subgenre. But nonetheless, I still came out enjoying it, and I'm glad I watched this movie. So yeah, that's my thoughts on M. Night Shyamalan's The Visit. Let me know down in the comment section if you've seen this movie before. Do you love this or do you hate this? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.